You know, the stories in the Bible, they're some of the most powerful ever told, right? But what if I told you their real power doesn't come from being totally new? Today, we're going to dive into this super fascinating idea that some of the Bible's biggest stories, well, they have echoes from a way older past. And honestly, that might just be the secret to their genius.
I mean, just think about it for a second. A world being created from, total chaos. A giant flood meant to wipe the slate clean for humanity. These aren't just biblical stories. Nope. These exact ideas pop up in myths that are centuries, sometimes millennia older. So what's the deal? Is that just a crazy coincidence? Or is it a clue to something way deeper about how big ideas actually stick?
And look at this. When you actually lay them out side by side, the similarities are just startling. I mean, creation from chaos, a massive flood, laws handed down from the gods. All these core themes from the Bible have direct parallels in these much, much older myths from the Near East. And let me tell you, that is absolutely not an accident. This is our first big clue.
Okay, so let's get one thing straight. The question here isn't if the biblical writers were influenced by older stories. That's pretty much a given. The evidence is just overwhelming. The real question, the one that's way more interesting, is why? Why on earth would they go out of their way to rework myths that were already out there? And it turns out this wasn't just them being creative. It was a strategy, a necessary one, for their ideas to even have a chance of survival.
All right, to really wrap our heads around this, you've got to flip your modern brain upside down. See, we're obsessed with what's new, right? The next big thing, innovation, disruption. But in the ancient world, it was the complete opposite. A brand new idea wasn't exciting. It was suspicious, deeply suspicious.
And this one idea, it changes everything. For people back then, authority came from age, period. Older literally meant truer. An idea was seen as legitimate not because it was some new revolutionary concept, but because it had been around forever. And why? Well, the thinking was the oldest ideas had to be the closest to the original divine truth.
We can actually give this mindset a name, authority through antiquity. And you can probably see how this created a massive problem for the biblical authors. I mean, imagine, you've got this radical, game-changing idea, like, say, monotheism, the belief in just one God. You can't just show up and announce it as this shiny new thing. No way. For anyone to take you seriously, you had to make it feel like it had been true forever.
Yeah, and you can see the massive hurdle right here. If you walk into town with a completely new story, something totally disconnected from the myths everyone already knows and trusts, you're not just going to get ignored. Your ideas would be seen as illegitimate, maybe even dangerous. It's like trying to pay for your groceries with a currency nobody's ever seen before. It's just not going to work.
So the big question is, how do you get revolutionary ideas across in a culture that hates anything new? Well, you pull off what you could almost call an authority hack. Instead of trying to invent brand new stories from scratch, the biblical authors did something brilliant. They took the powerful, well-known stories of their day and just masterfully remixed them to carry their new message.
And this wasn't some random idea. It was baked right into the culture of the scribes who were actually writing this stuff. For them, being a genius didn't mean making up something totally new. In fact, that might even seem kind of arrogant. No, the real mark of skill, of true insight, was being able to take an old, respected story and give it a new twist, to find new meaning inside that ancient, familiar form.
And they had this brilliant three-part strategy to pull it off. You can almost picture it as their toolkit for making new ideas feel old. First, they built a kind of cognitive on-ramp for the audience. Second, they used an ancestral anchor to lock it in. And third, they created a social safety net for when things got tough.
Okay, so step one, the cognitive on-ramp. This is pure psychology. It taps right into something called the familiarity bias. Basically, we are all hardwired to prefer things that feel familiar. It's just easier for our brains. So by using the skeletons of myths people already knew, the authors gave their audience an easy way in, a way to process and accept the new message. It was step one just to even be understood.
Now, step 2 is the ancestral anchor. And honestly, this is where the real genius is. It wasn't enough to just borrow a story structure. The truly brilliant move was how they took these big, universal myths and anchored them directly into their own people's memory. They wove these stories into their family trees, their genealogies. They linked them to specific promises, covenants, made with their own ancestors, guys like Abraham and Moses. This made the new ideas feel like they weren't new at all. It made them feel like they were ancient, essential truths that had been part of their story from the very beginning.
And finally, step 3, the social safety net. This part was absolutely critical, especially during times of total chaos, like the Babylonian exile. Imagine your whole world has been turned upside down. The nation feels shattered, the future is a complete unknown. By taking these familiar bedrock stories and giving them a new relevance, it provided a powerful sense of stability, of continuity. It let the culture adapt to a horrible new reality without just disintegrating.
So, when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you realize something pretty amazing. This whole process of borrowing and remixing, it wasn't a flaw. It wasn't them being unoriginal. It was the very engine that drove cultural and religious evolution. As a programmer might say, it was a feature, not a bug.
And that's really the heart of it all. The borrowing stops being something to be embarrassed about and becomes the engine of change. In a world that was allergic to new things, remixing old stories wasn't just a clever trick. It was pretty much the only way that deep new ideas could ever take root and actually grow.
So, why does any of this matter to us today? Well, for one, it's a masterclass in how traditions can evolve without shattering. It's practically a blueprint for how you can introduce new ideas without completely alienating people. It shows the genius of taking powerful, maybe even morally gray old stories and pointing them in a new, more ethical direction. And at its core, it grounds all this grand religious history in a very real, very human process.
When it comes down to it, the real achievement of the Bible wasn't that it somehow escaped its cultural world. Just the opposite. Its genius was that it dove headfirst right into the middle of it. It took the stories, the symbols, everything that was in the air at the time, and remixed them so skillfully that it ended up changing that whole culture from the inside out.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Because this whole process of remixing old stories to fit new realities, well, it obviously didn't stop a couple of thousand years ago. We're still doing it, all the time. So think about it. What are the ancient stories of our time? The foundational ideas we all take for granted that we're reinterpreting right now to make sense of our own crazy world.